Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is my dear friend, Phil McKenzie. Phil, it was a horrifically violent weekend.
It was crazy.
There was blood. There were concussions. There were complete wipeouts. There were technical masterclasses. There were extremely tightly contested tactical wars, which is always like my favorite sort of species of fight. You know, when you get a fight it really has super high stakes and there are some serious shots being traded, but there's constantly these little adjustments happening. Everything's just on a razor's edge the whole time. We had like 3 of those on this UFC card. We also had Tenshin versus Takeru, which, thank you. Should we even mention? Well, we should mention just because you should follow him and check out his stuff if you're not already. Miguel Class, very kindly, shared with us, since that fight was, quite infamously not broadcasted to, Western audiences live. Awesome fight. I hope you, find a way to track it down if you haven't, but we're going to try to hit that in addition to Emmett, Kattar and, Yanez versus Kelley from last weekend's UFC card. And then we've got another good-looking fight night card coming up next weekend. Maybe not quite as strong as this one on paper, but really nothing to sneeze at. With a great main event between Arman Tsarukyan and Mateusz Gamrot. And like I said, that card also is looking pretty good down the lineup. For a fight night card, this is like, it's a little closer to my typical high bar for a good fight night card, whereas last weekend's lineup, even just on paper, looked great and was somehow way, way better than great as it played out live. But yeah, we're currently sitting in a very nice spot, given that we don't have any like we're not anticipating or recapping any huge pay-per-views or anything. It still sort of has that feeling. We've seen some very, very exciting fights, and we have some, I think, very interesting fights still coming up in the very near future.
Yeah, it's just been pure quality. Like this weekend was fights that look great on paper, turning out to be absolutely incredible in like actuality.
Yeah,
the only thing, it's even one of those ones where like, I think you could probably argue that Emmett Kattar was perhaps even slightly less action-packed than you might have expected it to be, but it didn't matter because everything else just delivered.
Yeah, and then Emmett Kattar, like after the rest of the card being what it was, which was just mostly relentless violence, Emmett Kattar was almost like very refreshing in that it was, since, you had Ismagulov Kutateladze, which unfortunately we're going to talk about in a bonus episode, I think, on our Patreon, but not on this episode. But there were, just two just breakneck violent fights between Ismagulov Kutateladze and the main event. And then the main event was a very similar sort of breed of, like I said, tactical war. So I still loved it. Yeah, I was expecting more of a brawl to break out at some point, but it's very interesting that it didn't. And the fight is in no way underwhelming to revisit as a result. It was still a really interesting and exciting fight. So let's
it's either set or tied the record for stoppages. Had some real let's say it had the old fight for the troops cards. It had just there was some energy in the arena which would just led to violence all the time.
That is very much what it felt like. Yeah. I think everyone was just mad at Tony Kelley. All night. I think all Brazilians and Latinos in the audience were just like, man, I heard there's some total fuckboy on this card. And they were just, and then it makes sense too that if you were there in the audience right from the start, and there was a pretty good crowd early on even, then the entire card seems to bookend Yanez versus Kelley. It's right there smack in the middle. First fight on the main card, right in the middle of the whole affair. And, that's, we're gonna talk about that one. But first, let's discuss what actually happened in Emmett versus Kattar. I know you said I didn't even really score this one. I was just enjoying it too much, but I was a bit surprised. that Emmett got the nod. Not that I think it's an egregiously bad decision. It was a super close fight almost throughout. In fact, I think the only really clear round, well, I would say round 3 was very clearly Josh Emmett's. Mm-hmm. That was the clearest round of the fight. And then round 4 actually was pretty clear for Calvin Kattar.
Oh, yeah, that was very... I mean, he hurt Josh Emmett as bad as anyone got hurt in that fight, right?
Yeah, he came back... Well, I don't know about that. The thing is, Kattar hides it well. But the reason that I think this didn't boil over as quickly or as violently as I expected is that Josh Emmett, I think, put an actual scare in Calvin Kattar.
Yeah.
Which I have never seen before. Not even when he fought Max Holloway did he look... did he have that same sort of hesitance? I guess maybe there was a bit of that through the first 2 rounds of his fight with Zabit. When he sort of felt like he was being outfoxed and hit clean and just wasn't seeing anything and just wasn't getting enough exchanges to like get his hands on his opponent. He ended up looking a little deflated and had to really work to fire himself up. Here, I think it was a combination of that kind of a similar effect of like slickness, because there were some real moments of technical prowess by Josh Emmett here. But I also think it was just the power.
Yeah.
And particularly in round 3, because Emmett was not just landing power shots, but landing lots of power shots to the body. And I think tied with that shot in the 4th, maybe there was a left hook to the liver from Josh Emmett that just sort of made Calvin Kattar stop and think for a few seconds. I think he was probably hurt there and just disguised it fairly well. But it definitely took the steam out of him and put a real stamp on that 3rd round.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, once again, Emmett is one of those guys like Yair Rodriguez who isn't always the prettiest, but really does seem to rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
Especially of late. And yeah, I think a lot of this fight essentially came down to a harder scoring paradigm than people generally have to think about, which is, do you value clean, undefended jabs or partially blocked power punches? And there isn't really a super like clear answer to that one.
No, there isn't.
I mean, personally, I tend to sort of go for the jabs.
Same.
But even given that, this was one of those ones where, again, it was a fight where Kattar, I think, especially had to understand that if you're getting visibly moved around by your opponent's punches, even if you're, blocking them for the most part, people are going to see that, and they may score it against you. As I was saying before the call, I think I might actually score round 1 for Kattar if I was in a hypothetical, a world where I can just score fights how I like a fight site person. But it's not a round that you should ever expect to go like Kattar's way, and it's not a round that Kattar or his team should have expected would go his way because it's fairly inactive. He gets moved around by Emmett's punches, even though he's blocking most of them. And he stumbles at one point. You just count that as a loss. And sort of to that point, it did feel like Kattar had, and his corner was kind of shouting at him for this a bit. He did take a while to work his way into this fight.
He really did.
I mean, it was surprising how he had so much success with his jabs as soon as he started really committing to them. It was shocking that he allowed that first round to be so empty.
Yeah, and I would almost rephrase that. Like, it was almost like I thought this was yet another example where Kattar's jab started working when he started throwing it more with a little less commitment. Because I think Kattar, I've talked about this plenty of times in the past, he often has this tendency to just want to land really hard shots, even when he's jabbing. And weirdly, this I expected this to go in the direction of the Ige fight, right? Where, Emmett, I said, has a lot of craft as a counterpuncher and can probably slow the pace down a bit. And at some point, Kattar's just going to have to decide he wants to run him over. And that sort of happened. It sort of had that shape in a subdued way. It also felt a bit like Kattar versus Burgos. Because that's another fight where, like, right in the middle, it's super close early. And then right in the middle, this guy just starts getting really aggressive, hitting the body a lot. Was a common factor between the Burgos fight and this one. Because Emmett also hit the body a lot in round 2. I mean, he kind of lost it, which is, in my opinion, is a major reason why I didn't think he won the fight. He kind of got away from his best tactics. But in the Burgos fight, Kattar had to kind of go through the ringer and relax, or even like get a little tired, and then ease up. And it's almost like he gets put into this mindset where he can't afford to think of everything, so he just goes back to the most basic fundamentals, which is move around, pop the jab, touch, keep touching, make Josh Emmett reset constantly. And that's why I thought the 4th round went so great for him, because he threw way more jabs and didn't put nearly as much on them. And it started to have a serious effect. Because even early in the fight, even when he was working his jab and it was succeeding, there were also a lot of instances where Emmett was able to trade jabs with him. Like, it was actually, despite having a significant size disadvantage, Emmett's got a real knack for timing counters, and Kattar was stepping in too hard and loading up too much in those jabs and not leaving himself in a good position to follow up. And so, whether it was with cross counters or with simultaneous jabs, Emmett was able to time those shots and at the very worst exchange with him. And Kattar clearly didn't like that. I thought this was such an interesting fight from Josh Emmett. He's such an interesting fighter. He's
it's because he shouldn't work.
He contains multitudes, Phil. Because there are instances where he's like coming forward and just throwing caution to the wind, and it's just 9 hooks in a row. And you're like, this dude's just meathead.
Gritting his teeth.
Yeah.
Like, with the sheer effort of the punches he's throwing.
And while I liked this, again, in the first 3 rounds, when he did that, he usually finished those assaults with a body shot that would land horrifically clean. That's good. If you're going to just make the guy shell up and hit his body, I can't even critique that too much. But it is a meathead way of fighting. But then suddenly he goes on the back foot, and while Dominic Cruz is on the mic being like, the guy who goes forward's winning, because that's true of 98% of fights, it wasn't really true here. A lot of that 3rd round was won off the back foot, because when Kattar isn't being a meathead, he does a very convincing impression of a slick counterpuncher. Like,
you mean Emmett, when Emmett?
Emmett, sorry, yes. He really is slick when he has a mind to be slick, like he was in the Burgos fight. And just like, using head movement, I would have liked to see a couple more counters off of the head movement from Emmett, but still a really admirable job of moving his head, keeping his...
Yeah, got a nice dipping jab from that, jab and left hook that he did throw in as counters every now and again.
Keeping his feet moving really well, like, sort of stepping away and then kind of squaring up his stance so he could kind of fake Kattar out, go one way and then the other.
So, I mean, I think that is also another reason for why the fight started to kind of turn for him late. Is that his style requires so much energy. Yeah. I mean, Kattar said he probably won't have he won't have 5-round experience, and that was true, and they were pretty much Emmett's worst rounds. Yeah. But also, it's just shocking that they weren't worse than that. Right. I mean, he uses so much lateral motion. He, as you said, I mean, the idea of like integrating his punches is like, it's something that he doesn't do very much, but it's completely alien to Josh Emmett. Yes. It's utterly alien. He's got shot selection, and he's got head movement and all this other kind of stuff, but he does not do anything at anything less than 120% power.
And really great positioning, like in the Burgos fight. I think that's what sort of kept him going in the later stages here, is that he was just able
But I think he was just losing a lot of the...
yes.
He was losing a lot of just the lateral motion that was, Kattar being somewhat flat-footed was just not able to line him up for the multiple jabs and quite so much. Mm-hmm. He was really having to rely on the head movement and the counter punching.
Oh, if people want to see it, by the way, I'm watching as we talk. That left hook I was talking about from Emmett. It's such a nice. He does one of my favorite techniques, which looks like a meathead thing that shouldn't work that well, but is really, really sneaky and difficult to defend. You see this if you watch literally any boxing match where it's in black and white, you're going to see this move a lot. And that is the naked step in body shot with the left hand. Mm-hmm. Where you just sort of, maybe you give a little feint, something to sell, and then you either shift or you just hop step in and plug the person in the ribs, and you step in as confidently as if you're moving in with a jab or something. The trouble is it's really difficult to deal with. And if you get your head offline as you come in, it's pretty difficult to counter as well. And
I think John Jones was actually quite good at that, right?
Yeah. And Emmett does that, and then immediately after, does the exact same motion. They call this the oh God, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. All I know is Gabe Rosado is a boxer, and his old coach, I remember hearing him call out for the Patterson in a particular fight. Mm-hmm. This is the Floyd Patterson move where you do this huge loaded up left hook, and then you load up again, and you just let the opponent see it, and then crack him with a short left hook upstairs. I guess that's a Boss Rutan technique too.
Yep.
Is like you can actually benefit from the fact that the opponent knows you're loading up on a punch and is worried about it. Like if you're a serious puncher like Emmett is, that kind of stuff works. I'm going to hit you. Now you got to figure out where I'm going to hit you. Really nice sequence. But yeah, I think, somebody said to me, after this fight on Twitter, and as always, I will apologize for not remembering who it was, that Josh Emmett is a super interesting fighter, but that they feel like his style is going to completely collapse when he loses a shade of athleticism.
Yeah.
On the one hand, that seems right, because, I mean, look, he gets by so much in his power. On the other hand, if that happens and he has enough time left to come up with an adjustment, I think he actually has the technical understanding. Like literally all he would have to do is learn to grade 8 his punches. Mm-hmm. And just preserve himself and not put so much. He'd still be a serious puncher. He's got defense. He's got really good positioning and solid footwork. And he's got a style where he can allow good fighters to get the front foot on him and still largely neutralize them.
Admittedly, he can do that because he has a tremendously quick step in and disgusting power.
Yeah, that's part of it. But I do think there's already enough there that it shouldn't take much for Josh Emmett to turn this incredible kind of fighting that he's clearly capable of. Because it was not a perfect fight by any means. I kind of had the feeling Kattar won. But if you had to look at either of these guys and say, which one of these guys had the most perfect minutes in this fight, it was Josh Emmett. Mm-hmm. Again, that third round was the clearest round of the fight, I thought, by a pretty big margin. And Emmett did some really great work throughout that round, and just shut Kattar out while really breaking him down and beating him up pretty badly at points. So yeah, he's interesting. Like I said, he contains multitudes. Is he a meathead? Is he an athletic cheater? Is he a slick technician? Is he even a very good fighter all the time? Sometimes he seems to fight down to his opposition, and he's just not that impressive. He can't come up with any good ideas. Other times, you're like, oh my God, this guy is like a title challenger.
Yeah, I mean, he's got.
He probably
And he also
is a
doesn't really
title
have anywhere to go in the rankings anymore,
No,
apart from like a title eliminator.
Or yeah, they could throw. He's just beat Kattar. I mean, they could put him in there against Volkanovski now.
Yeah,
it would be awesome.
But,
I think it'd be an interesting test.
Yeah, it's all dependent on who wins out of Volkanovski and Holloway, really.
Right. I think it'd be an interesting fight for either of them, to be honest. I mean, Emmett's he's just.
Well, I mean, sorry, I think I beg your pardon. It depends on who wins between Ortega and Rodriguez. If Rodriguez beats Ortega, they will 100% put him into a title shot ahead of Josh Emmett.
Oh, great. I would much rather see Josh Emmett versus Volkanovski.
So basically, he needs to hope that Rodriguez doesn't beat Ortega, and if Rodriguez does beat Ortega, he needs to hope that Holloway beats Volkanovski.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, they might feasibly be able to say Rodriguez-Ortega would be a rematch, at least. Josh Emmett is a fresh face. But yeah, he's in 100% in title eliminator, potential title shot region. If
this were many other divisions, you'd be like, oh my God, make that fight right now. Because I want to see it. But it's featherweight. It's too stacked. There's too many great fighters just cramming up the top of the division. But yeah, really great. I thought Kattar also came back super strong, like he always does. He's just a phenomenal late round fighter. But
yeah, and in a less meat-headed way than because I think we were a bit concerned that he would just brawl it out with Emmett once he got into trouble. But no, it was really it was a very considered sort of measured comeback from him, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
with just the right amount of violence.
I'm always viewing fighters' careers in this sort of storybook kind of way. And this was a great fight to remind me that is not really always how real people work. Mm-hmm. That there have been numerous times where I'm like, Kattar's regressing. And maybe it's just that there are multiple Calvin Kattars. And sometimes one version shows up because the circumstances demand it. Sometimes another version shows up. And the same is true of Josh Emmett, that they can both have nights where they look a little underwhelming, and they can both have nights where they look like the best fighter in the division. And sometimes they can do both of those things in the same fight, which I think kind of happened here for both of them. But yeah, really amazing that they both tested each other and sort of plumbed those limits. All right, let's make this just a long first segment. Surprise, surprise. And squeeze in a little discussion of the fight everyone's talking about, especially the man who lost it, Adrian Yanez versus Tony Kelley.
Of all the fights on this, I mean, there were lots of different flavors of violence that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But it's rare that you really get to watch, karmically satisfying technical demolition.
Yes. This was easily the most satisfying thing to happen on the entire card. I really, really first of all, a great coming out kind of performance from Adrian Yanez. This is we really need to pay attention to this guy now, which we have been already because he's awesome. But I love when I get to see a superb technician, which Yanez is, teach somebody a lesson.
Yeah.
When I see a technician make a decision for one reason or another to kind of not do everything completely perfect and by the book in the interest of absolutely whooping someone's ass. There were moments in this fight that reminded me of Jose Aldo. When we've seen this so many times throughout Aldo's career where, we know he's a phenomenal technician. He's got great defense. He can put together wonderful combinations, and he's got a fantastic jab and great footwork, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Every layer of striking technique, Aldo is the pinnacle, for the most part, of what we've seen in MMA. And yet we've seen so many occasions throughout his career where he senses the opponent is gaining a little momentum, or that the opponent is close to breaking, or he senses that he's put himself out of position, and maybe the opponent sees something. And he's like, yeah, you know what, maybe this is risky, but I'm just going to throw 5 of the hardest punches I can think of. And there were a couple of key moments in this fight where Yanez, I think, looking at this, Yanez could have won this fight with less effort, and less risk. Mm-hmm. I think he really could have just jabbed Tony Kelley to pieces, as like he usually does, and sort of paved the way for a really clean win. And instead what happened is he would like overcommit or something, or he would pull back and Kelley would be right on top of him and he'd be like, nah, I'm not going to let you think you have a chance here. And he would just uncork like 5 wicked hooks in a row. And just essentially say like, yeah, okay, you can trade. You want to trade in the pocket? Let's trade. And just attempt to terrify and destroy Tony Kelley. And to see somebody who is as technical on the feet as Yanez making those decisions is very, very exciting to me. I mean, that's like one of my favorite things. Is just
yep.
a fighter who seems normally interested in perfection being like, you know what? I want blood. I don't want perfection. I want to drink this man's blood. I want to swim in his viscera.
So yeah, Kelley was sort of apparently talking in the fight about how Yanez was
a version of Jorge
Masvidal, right?
Yeah.
And but we were saying, like, again, before we recorded this fight, this is exactly the kind of fight that at this point in his career, Jorge Masvidal would have got flash knocked down in the first, easily won the second, and then like weirdly cruise through the third to like a bizarre split decision, potential loss. Like, that's the thing, is that everyone was worried that Yanez might be a classic young veteran who would take all this time to evolve into a genuine physical force because he was just spending all this time learning using fights as learning processes. Mm-hmm. But he is instead using clearly, since the Randy Costa fight, which was, one of the most significant demonstrations of that kind of style. He's just been going out there and going to war immediately.
Yeah. And by the way, I didn't think that the Costa fight was like a bad look. Like, it felt like, because there was just so much crammed into like, well, that fight was like 6.5 minutes, right? Like,
yeah, of which like 4 minutes of him was getting absolutely smoked.
Yeah. But realistically, especially considering how quickly it turned, it was not like an untenable amount of time for Yanez to be like, how do I figure this out? And to just stay in the fight and keep forcing Costa to make decisions so he can get a read on him. That's not like the worst.
But conversely, like Tony Kelley just charged Costa and beat him quite easily.
That clearly there was a less calculated way to just put Costa immediately into a fight that he was not comfortable with. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this was like, this was like the technical kind of, precision that Yanez puts on people, but just accelerated.
Mm-hmm. Which is really, just really nice.
Calculated risks.
He was countering kicks, which was again like
with left hooks.
Sorry?
Countering kicks with left hooks. Usually it's the catch and right hand. And I love the catch and then left hook. It is so sneaky. It's actually exactly how Arman Tsarukyan, who we'll talk about in a moment, how Tsarukyan knocked out Christos Giagos. Mm-hmm. He had a kick coming, evaded it, and then the left hook it's just so difficult to see coming when you're recovering from a kick. I loved that kick counter from Yanez. Anyway, go on, sorry.
And that is also, another reason why people would be like, oh yeah, he's a bit like Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah, right.
That's exactly what Jorge Masvidal do. Although, as you said, like it's generally more of a right hand from Masvidal. But just like really nice working around Kelley's guard. Mm-hmm. As soon as Kelley was like, okay, I'm gonna throw the guard up and wait for this guy to stop punching me. Like, Yanez is he's just a horrible guy to be just purely defensive against.
Oh my god!
because just like short hooks around the guard, like up the middle, body work, like you can't just shell against this guy.
Yeah, the
and
body
like
work
tight and you're just tight and concise.
Yeah. And concussive too. Like, yeah, it's not, these are hard shots that just don't have a ton of wind up and don't take a long while to get to the target. The body shots were huge. For all that I had so many opportunities the previous weekend to complain about people dropping the ball there, Yanez did exactly what I would like to see every fighter do. There, in fact, immediately after he first really hurt Kelley with that left hook counter to the caught kick, he came in, jab feint, got Kelley to kind of hunch over and double up, and then bam, 2 body shots, just ripped him, right hook, left hook, right under and around the guard. In fact, the first time he did one of those kick counters, he did the same left hook after catching the kick, but it was a left hook to the body. So he even countered the kick with body shots, and then was just continually, for the rest of the fight, finding opportunities to just nail Kelley in the ribs, like horrifically short, precise, stabbing body shots. That, yeah, I think just accelerated the finish. Like, once Kelley was hurt, that's why you do that, especially in a finishing sequence. It's not just that, it'll bring the guy's hands down and let you get in the big final shot, although that is absolutely a great reason, but it fucking sucks to just have somebody's knuckles sink 4 inches into your gut while you're like freaking out and just trying not to get hit in the face more than anything. It's horrible. It's debilitating. It's demoralizing. And it's a clean shot. Like, you spend all of most fights trying to outposition somebody, just to get in a single clean shot. Why would you not just take a free, like a shot you would throw on a heavy bag? That's what you get when you get somebody shelled up because you've stung them and you decide to just whack them in the ribs. You get to punch like you punch a heavy bag. You don't get to do that in fights unless somebody's hurt, and you don't get to land shots that clean unless you go to the body in those circumstances. Brilliant from Yanez. And Tony Kelley has, of course, continued being like racist and weird and insecure after the fight, and Yanez has just been taking the opportunity to talk shit and dunk on him because
because he thoroughly deserves it and got horrifically whooped. I mean, also like a very funny ending sequence. Like when he's just beating the shit out of him from like multiple different angles. Like, Tony Kelley must have felt like he was being beaten up by Agent Smith. Like, just like there was a Yanez everywhere.
Yes,
there was one behind him punching him in the face. There was one in front of him punching him in the face.
Yeah.
Like,
and then he got kicked in the head by the referee when he tried to save him.
The referee landed a flying knee as he went past. Like, it was really just...
I said that live. It looked like someone being jumped.
It really did.
By like 5 different dudes, where you're like, you get hit from behind and you're on your knees. You're like, where are they? And then someone else you didn't see yet hits you, except it's just Yanez doing a fucking Bugs Bunny beatdown on your ass.
Yeah. And then the last guy on the crew, namely the old ref, like runs in to get his shot right at the end.
Yeah.
Like, once the youthful crew of just like Yanez, and Yanez have done their work, the rest just like, I'm in the fight too.
The old guy who is the gang's designated driver comes in just to get the lick in when he knows he's not going to get any pushback. Beautiful. Yeah. So immensely satisfying. A superb, I hope, sort of breakout performance for Yanez, and in just so many ways. Like, we didn't even mention the fact Tony Kelley missed weight too. Like, at least among his crimes, there were so many reasons that he was just begging for a beatdown here, and boy did he get it.
And now Yanez is ranked, which means he has any one of a number of incredible fights that he could potentially take.
Oh my god. Yanez at bantamweight fighting ranked bantamweights, like, I'm so excited to see this guy going forward. I mean,
Jack Shaw.
Oh my god.
Sean O'Malley.
He called out Sean O'Malley. I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
I'd love to see him.
Sean O'Malley will give him that fight.
He probably doesn't want it, but I'd love to see those kick counters against Sean O'Malley. Yeah, his whole UFC career has just been like electrifying and technically impressive. He's somebody who can deliver the excitement of a crazy brawler while just being a really clean fighter. I love it.
Yeah, and it's just a great, this is just a real star-making fight of the kind one you want to see. It was a guy that almost everyone apart from the most racist dickheads found incredibly annoying. It was a hometown win for Yanez. It had a cool meme finish. Great stuff.
Yep. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to move on to previewing our upcoming main event, Tsarukyan versus Gamrot. If we have time, we might try Magny Rakhmonov, the co-main event as well, although it's also possible at this point, since we've already been here for 36 minutes, that that will end up as another section on our Patreon bonus episode, in which we are going to take a look at a couple other fights from the Emmett Kattar undercard, which, as we've said multiple times, was just riddled with the most disgusting violence you can imagine. And then finally, at the end, we are going to hit Tenshin versus Takeru. All of that after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Okay, folks, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about a lightweight main event scheduled for next weekend. Arman Tsarukyan, who just had his own sort of coming out performance, absolutely thrashing Joel Alvarez, is taking on Mateusz Gamrot. Mateusz? I kept hearing them say it. Doesn't seem right. I'm going to go on saying Mateusz until someone corrects me who knows what they're talking about. Anyway, what a fight.
Yeah, this was one of those ones where there was, admittedly it was most of what I saw was this person getting dunked on, but where people were like, is this the most anonymous matchup in UFC history or something like that? And no, it isn't. But also, because there have been women's featherweight main events and some really, that's the thing, you can't remember super anonymous main events.
Yeah.
But also, it's a tremendous fight, and this is the kind of fight that I want main events to be.
Mm-hmm.
I.e., elite prospects breaking into the rankings,
right,
and having to fight against each other to make it higher. This is exactly what 5-round main events should be there for.
Yeah,
at good weight classes.
And at good, yes, that's a very important aspect too. That it's a lightweight main event, it can only be better for that. Tsarukyan is actually had a lot of that kind of matchup in his career. To be fair, I guess Gamrot had that when he fought Kutateladze in a fight that we talked about a lot last week because of Kutateladze versus Ismagulov. But Tsarukyan has just repeatedly been matched against really tough guys with a little cachet. Around the time he fought Davi Hamosh, that was oh, this guy might have something. Here's a super athletic, incredible grappler, still kind of learning the ropes. Of course, we've talked many times already about his UFC debut, which was against Islam Makhachev, of all people, and to this day has got to be Makhachev's toughest win in the UFC. And then I would say fighting Joel Alvarez was another one of those. It's here's both these guys with tons of momentum, both very dangerous. Let's pit them against each other. And Tsarukyan has come through looking incredible even in the one loss, which was to a guy who will almost certainly be fighting for a title very soon. And so here it is again. Tsarukyan, another tough matchup. And on the one hand, it feels unfair. On the other hand, it's all I want to see because he keeps looking unbelievably good in all of these incredibly tough matchups.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, he's been looking better in these last couple of fights. He's been, because I think if there's been a marker against him, it's that he's a tremendous wrestler and scrambler, but that he would, and admittedly this was sort of dictated by the people he'd be matched up with, but that aside from that, he didn't have a super formalized game. That he basically, people would wrestle with him and then he would out-wrestle them. That's that's been who he's been in the UFC. But I think last two fights, we're seeing him like just blossom as a genuinely violent fighter who is also impossible to out-wrestle and and an increasingly decent, well-coached striker on the feet.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, to his credit, he mostly just outboxed Davi Hamosh.
Mm-hmm.
So even back in 2020, you could see that when he felt it was necessary, he could just kind of lean on a different aspect of his game and very comfortably win a fight with it. But yeah, he has been meaner in his last two fights. Go on.
Yeah, but kind of given that, and this may end up being, one of these factors which allows people to be like, well, look, I told you so. Who are these guys? This is one of those fights where you're giving Arman Tsarukyan someone who's of a type with a lot of the guys that he's already beaten.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Gamrot is one of the most wrestling-dependent opponents that he's fought.
Mm-hmm.
And that really does feel like it comes right into Tsarukyan's wheelhouse.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, this is one where if he felt it was necessary, I would also pick Tsarukyan to win it on the feet. I just think he's, like Gamrot is, you say wrestling dependent, I would say, is oftentimes quite shaky as a striker.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of these fighters who, he has lots of good ideas, and he's a great athlete. So he can make these ideas work. So like he can put sequences of strikes together, decent shot selection, he can counter, he can lead, all these things. He's competent, but oftentimes you'll get into a situation where a small move would do, and Gamrot always makes the big move. If he's getting out of range, it's a really big leaping step out of range. If he's evading a shot, he's like switching stances, like in the pocket to like get his leg out of the way or change an angle. Really big, dramatic movements, which can be bad because it's energy intensive. And I believe we have seen on a couple of occasions Gamrot slowing down. To his credit, I mean, again, he spends so much energy doing everything he does, and it doesn't really affect the way he fights. He's one of those guys who expects to get a little tired and will maintain the pace regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger thing is that you get in there in striking exchanges with a guy like Tsarukyan, who is super compact with everything he does, and I expect to see Gamrot getting beaten to the punch here. I mean, it's already happened before. It happened against Kutateladze. It happened an awful lot in that fight with Ferreira. With Ferreira, where Ferreira would just 1-2s, just firing shots down the middle, and Gamrot was in there trying to exchange, trying to again do some kind of stance switch to throw a tricky hook around the side, and we just get beamed on the nose. Because Ferreira is just sort of like that dynamic I talked about when we previewed Jack Shore versus starts with a V.
Valiev?
Yeah, versus Valiev. These really big extravagant moves, and if somebody sits there waiting on them, they can be flummoxed and very difficult to read. But if you do the principled thing and just sort of realize I'm in a good position, he's opening his center, let me just fire straight shots that he's not going to be able to stop, you're going to poke a lot of holes in that approach to striking. So honestly, I think even if this was just a striking battle, I would still favor Tsarukyan.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think he's got better straight shots. He's got better counters, and Gamrot is very counterable and easy to interrupt with good, concise, straight punching.
Yeah, and so a lot of... I mean, I'd sort of forgotten how badly that fight with Fajera was going until Gamrot picked up the submission.
Yeah.
I think the dynamic of it was actually sort of reversed in my head, in that it was Gamrot forcing a lot of scrambles and sort of winning in the beginning, and then Fajera kind of tuning him up on the feet, and then Gamrot surprising him with a takedown at the end and getting a rear naked. Well, it was the
knee to the ribs.
The knee into the rear naked. But was it actually a TKO? I forget.
It was a TKO.
But,
yeah, he jumped on the choke after Fajera asked the referee to stop it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, his path to victory in that fight was to get takedowns on Fajera and exhaust and rely on Fajera to exhaust himself with his own scrambling, as he did against what's his face, Gregor Gillespie.
Mm-hmm.
But that also doesn't feel like it's going to work against our man Tsarukyan.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be very possible to tire Tsarukyan out with Gamrot's wrestling. I do think he'll probably pick up some takedowns, not least because Tsarukyan's quite happy to pump kicks at range.
Yes.
And I think Gamrot will be able to bundle him over with some takedowns. I'm just not sure they're going to lead to much, especially not over 5.
Yeah, Tsarukyan.
I trust Tsarukyan to be able to keep a hold of his gas tank, to be able to scramble out of most bad positions. I mean, like you said, Gamrot is a good athlete. Mm-hmm. I think Tsarukyan is simply a better one.
Yeah, I agree. Tsarukyan loves that. He's got a very quick left kick that he will throw like karate style without even switching or anything or repositioning his feet. But yeah, that seems like something that could be timed and turned into a takedown. First of all, Tsarukyan actually hasn't been taken down once since he fought Islam Makhachev. And even in that fight, he's a incredibly tenacious scrambler.
And he was like 13 years old in that fight or whatever it was.
yeah, it was some 15 years ago now. The problem is that for Gamrot is that he is inherently a wrestler who allows scrambles. He just does not have he has a very like alpha male sort of approach.
Yeah, I thought that was exactly what I was thinking.
Where he'll take you down, and it's like, and I really like this about his style, and it really breaks a lot of people, and it's incredible how many takedowns he can hit in a fight, and just keep scrambling, and then just you think he's getting tired, and he just goes for more. And his approach is like, I'm going to take you down, and then I've got the energy to do it again. I know I can take you down again. In fact, when we get back to the feet, I'm going to get other shit to work because now you're thinking about it, because that was a really clean entry. And so he seems to think that, because all these things are true, the best thing to do is to just sort of let you get back up and to just hit you on the way. Or see if you expose something and I can jump on a submission. And there was a lot of that. In fact, his best moments against Fajeda were probably because Fajeda also did a remarkable job of scrambling free, as he always does. And Gamrot just kept hitting him with like short right hooks and uppercuts as he was standing up. And he'll do that. He will stand over somebody and let them fight back to their feet. If there are shots to be had from that standing guard sort of position, he'll take them. And then when you try to do a technical stand-up, he'll get one more free shot. And in his mind, I think he reckons he'll just get another takedown and it's fine.
Yeah.
Against Tsarukyan, it's like, you may not get another takedown. If you get the first one at all, you might actually get straight up beaten in the scramble and end up on bottom. And here's a guy who I'm pretty sure can actually match your pace and is perfectly happy to have you continually shooting on him. In fact, I don't think it's going to really even affect Tsarukyan's decision-making process when it comes to the striking exchanges. Because even right from the jump, he reacts to takedown attempts, whenever the rare ones that come, incredibly quickly. And then you have to deal with the fact that what if I'm doing these? I mean, because Gamrot really likes a super low shot. You're going to get front headlocked by Tsarukyan. And that's a lot of weight and a lot of muscle power on top of you, squeezing your neck and probably using that point of leverage to then win more and more scrambles as the fight goes on. Meanwhile, he's probably just beating you on the feet too. So I think it'll be an incredibly fun test, as so many of Tsarukyan's matchups have been, but I think like all of those, I just see no reason not to pick Tsarukyan.
Yeah, I mean, against Joel Alvarez, I think it was, Alvarez did try and scramble out against Tsarukyan. Admittedly, not as much as he should have done, but when Tsarukyan took him down, he simply never got up again.
Yes.
I think did it take him 2 rounds to finish him? I don't think he stood up either time.
Only just. I mean, it took him like 6 minutes.
Yeah. So the first takedown he got in the first round, that was just control time and violence until the end of the first round, and then the second takedown he TKO'd him.
Yep.
So yeah, he is he's like a flyweight version of a grappler in that he has he will go for lockdown positions.
Yeah, well, and also just...
Sorry, an anti-flyweight grappler, I mean.
I know exactly what you mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it is just more in line with what is, really working at high-level MMA grappling right now. Gamrot's style is a cool niche. I like it. I like the pace wrestler approach, and it works against a lot of fighters who are just not used to having to deal with such a volume of wrestling attacks. But, like you said, Tsarukyan gets you down. You might get that glimmer that Gamrot always gives his opponents multiple times per fight where you're like, ooh, I'm making it back up to my feet. And then suddenly there's a cross wrist, your post is broken down, you're being ridden, there's a ton of weight on top of you, and you're being punched in the side of the head. Much more like the way it feels when Khabib took you down. It's just more punishing and demoralizing, I think, than even than Gamrot's approach can be. And in particular, Gamrot's approach just does not seem to line up well with whatever Tsarukyan's weaknesses are.
Yeah, I mean, I still think he's not the most comfortable, the most comfortable striker in the world. Mm-hmm. But it simply hasn't mattered against any of the people he's been up against because he's either been able to crush them from as a wrestling threat or as a striking threat. Mm-hmm. Simply too insulated, I bet, by combination of just tremendous athleticism and a very deep skill base in one area. And
I would still say he's more comfortable on the feet than like another super prospect of recent years in Mirsad Bektic. Mm-hmm. It's not that level of discomfort. It's like, oh, this isn't.
No. He looks like he's someone who's well trained and developing.
Yes, and also doesn't freak out and get tired. Mm-hmm. Not even when he had to debut against Makhachev and had to scramble and wrestle with him for 3 rounds straight. And he's only more comfortable now. So yeah, good fight, interesting matchup, but all the same, pretty easy pick, in my opinion.
Yep.
Let's talk very quickly then about the co-main event here. Neil Magny, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Did Magny call out Rakhmonov, or who was it he called out after beating Max Griffin?
I believe he might have done. He might have called out Khamzat. Neil Magny doesn't...
He did call out Khamzat, you're right.
Neil Magny will call out anyone. I respect it.
Oh, man. And after, it was the birth of violence, Neil Magny, too, in that Max Griffin fight. Never have I seen a more savage Neil Magny. So yeah, I'm very interested in this one. What do you make of it?
I mean, it feels like one where you've got to give all the intangible advantages to Shavkat Rakhmonov.
Right.
So the main thing is that, like, the main hope for all those rabid Neil Magny fans out there is that Shavkat Rakhmonov, despite looking like a bit of a killer, suddenly finds himself staring into the swirling, hypnotic clinch vortex. Clinch. Clinch. He's probably not going to, though, is he?
Well, I don't know. He might.
I mean, so here's the thing. I mean, here's the interesting thing, is that, like, Rakhmonov is not really... You know, we've mentioned that there's a lot of... there are styles which solve Neil Magny in the past. And if you're not one of those styles, you're going to have a horrendous time against him.
Yeah.
He might not necessarily beat you, but it's going to be really tough.
Yeah, you either crush Neil Magny or you're just miserable for 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I don't think Shavkat Rakhmonov is actually any of those styles. He's not a super consistent pressure boxer. He's not a big low kicker. And he's not a really diligent wrestler and top control player. If you're any one of those to like a really high degree, you are going to probably thrash Neil Magny. He's got elements of all these things. He's clearly a very good wrestler when he wants to be. He can low kick. He can pressure. He's a good boxer. So, you know, potentially he could, in fact, have a very one-sided fight with Neil Magny. But he doesn't really... You know, it would have to be a synthesis. It's not one of these ones like Ponzinibbio or like... I mean, Magny called out Luque, but did he ever fight him?
I don't think so. It would have been probably a miserable fight for him.
He would have got slaughtered.
Yeah.
If Luque was in any kind of shape, I think. Or Maya, or Chiesa, or any of these guys. It's just like, no, see how this goes, know how it goes.
RDA, my God.
RDA, yeah. That's at least two of the...
That's the archetypal.
Two, if not all of them.
Yeah, that's the archetypal Neil Magny loss because it contains elements of every other fight he's ever lost.
Yes. It was literally RDA being like, which one of my crushing style archetypes would I like to select from to completely annihilate?
I have 3 devastating paths to victory, and I'm going to cram them all into like 3.5 minutes. But yeah, I agree with you. Rakhmonov is, I mean, when he is a pressure boxer too, I think he's really at his best as sort of an aggressive counterpuncher. Yeah. And the interesting thing here is that Rakhmonov is big. He's tall. He's rangy. And, Neil Magny's bigger. So you do have to wonder how that affects him. I mean, that's why everyone else clinches with Neil Magny. Because they look at him and you're like, oh my God, he's gigantic. He's what, like 6'3", 80 inch. He's John Jones at welterweight.
Yes, he is essentially, he is the size of John Jones.
Pretty much.
Minus a couple of inches.
Yeah, a couple inches of reach only, and even so, I believe he's got a 3-inch reach advantage here, wingspan-wise, over Rakhmonov, and a couple inches of height. And so you do wonder, how is Rakhmonov going to do his usual thing? How is he going to draw Neil Magny out in such a way that he can punish him? Granted, he's going to be faster. His hands are going to be quicker. He can absolutely get in those counters. But can you do it consistently for 3 rounds, especially given that Neil Magny, if it's not a complete sustained thrashing and he just literally can't get into the fight, always gets tougher and more aggressive as the fight goes on. Pretty much always. And does that mean Rakhmonov is going to get nervous and clinch with him? I mean, he's still, despite it being the only way to make the fight difficult, he still ended up having to clinch quite a lot with Carlston Harris.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. He always clinches with everyone.
Yeah. He clinched with Cowboy Oliveira.
It was fine with what's his face? With Przerich, because he's like 3 feet taller than him. Yeah. And 20 years younger. And
I was impressed at how he dealt with Harris, even though we knew it was an easy pick, but we sort of pegged that as like a sneakily dangerous matchup. And he handled those body lock clinch situations quite well. Likewise,
but not like perfectly. No. You didn't find yourself looking at that and you weren't like, man, this guy is, you cannot fuck with this guy in this. I mean, more to this point, the Cowboy Oliveira finish.
Yeah.
He clinched up with Oliveira by the cage, got taken down by him, and then guillotined him.
Yeah.
I mean, and there were a lot of 50-50 exchanges where he was really trying to haul Harris off his feet in that fight.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if, say, Harris was a huge giant man who was impossible to haul off his feet from a body lock, that might have gotten Rakhmonov in some trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think the more I think about it, the more you are like, oh, Magny could actually kind of win this.
He could. He could have an absolutely horrific first round, which he probably will, and still win it. It still does.
He have a horrific first round? I mean, there's the thing, he has these horrific first rounds normally against people who are, you know, who are one of the three.
I think it could be quite a bit like how Max Griffin took him to task in the first round, which was a pretty like tactical performance from Max Griffin. He tried to work low kicks and stay at range and draw Magny in and then hurt him on counters. I think Rakhmonov could do a version of that, maybe a more aggressive version, but I think he is gonna show up with a significant hand speed advantage in the pocket.
Yeah.
From the jump. So I do expect him to land some pretty nasty counter shots, and even if it's a close round, I expect Rakhmonov will probably have the big moment early on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you know, one bad decision from Rakhmonov, and you're getting tangled up in clinches or possibly getting taken down by a guy who, like, literally everyone gets a moment where they think the deceptive moment, where they're like, oh, I'm actually easy body lock on this dude. I can kind of throw him around. He's kind of willowy. And it just gets worse and worse and worse for you as the fight goes on. And suddenly it's not even up to you to engage in the clinches anymore. They're just happening. Neil Magny is making them happen. And especially in that Max Griffin fight, Neil Magny was so aggressive getting his way back into that fight, more than I've ever seen. That was not Max Griffin falling into a Neil Magny fight. That was Neil Magny forcing his fight on an opponent. And I'm very curious.
It's a shame that Mike Pyle took the name Quicksand, because it would be a good one.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Or Magny. And yeah, I'm just not sure how much, like, because so much of Rakhmonov's game has been built around, I think, being a tall man striker beating up on short people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the step knees and the counterpunching and so on.
Yep.
I just don't know how much he's going to enjoy fighting Neil Magny. I mean, of course, you know, Neil Magny's been fighting for ages and he's not impossible to finish. Could end up making us looking really stupid and he could just dust him in round one. But I really think, like, yeah, this has genuine potential to be like an ugly, tough Neil Magny fight.
Yeah. He's not impossible to finish, but he is actually very hard to finish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Neil Magny's had a shitload of fights. And what has he been KO'd 3 times? Twice. Submitted 4. All by exceptionally good grapplers. Like, to submit Neil Magny, if you're not Damian Maia or RDA, and you go to the ground, you're getting out grappled by Neil Magny. And beaten up too. I mean, a super underappreciated element of Magny's game. As is so often the case, good clinch strikers are good ground and pounders.
Yeah.
And Neil Magny
he's a very violent clinch striker if he gets positioned.
Yes, and a ground and pounder. Neil Magny in half guard, postured up, is scary. Genuinely a very scary position to be in. And and he's had fights like his fight with like Hector Lombard, you know, where the sheer difficulty of finishing him can be a serious asset. Neil Magny has, in so many ways, that quicksand effect you're talking about. Whether it's the clinch fight or the, oh my god, I'm beating this guy up. If you can't pass that barrier where you're like Lorenz Larkin or RDA just smashing him instantly, the fight is going to be just really miserable. I don't know. Am I going to pick Neil Magny? I think I might, just for the fun of it. I mean, I still think Rakhmonov is going to win the first round. I think it would only take a small element of just good game planning for Rakhmonov to turn this into a fairly clean win. And yet, A, I'm not sure that he is much of a game planner at all. And B, I'm less certain of that than I would have been now, having seen how Neil Magny dealt with Max Griffin outfighting him. And that he actually had to very proactively drag Max Griffin into a messy and shockingly violent Neil Magny kind of fight.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'll take Neil Magny just for fun. I think he is an interesting test for Rakhmonov, more than I would have thought a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think, the more I think about it, I think it's, he's just not one of the triumvirate of Magny killers.
Right.
And those have always been rough fights for whoever takes them on. It doesn't even matter if you're even back when Magny was a much worse striker than he was now, when he was fighting like Tim Means.
Mm-hmm.
Like in 2014, Neil Magny had no business beating Tim Means.
Mm-hmm.
He did.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to take Rakhmonov just because, just for the youth pick. And
makes me feel better about my pick, if I'm honest. If you'd picked Neil Magny, I would have, of course, been certain he was going to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it remains a mystery.
Right, yeah, that's one of the reasons I want to keep the Magny hopes alive.
That's
here.
right.
Also, just because I think Rakhmonov is just very, very good at hurting people. I think even if it is a weird fight, he can probably pick up like a moment in 2 rounds where he just hurts Neil. Yeah,
but there's still going to be that thing where like Max Griffin is able to just shock Neil Magny with his speed. Rakhmonov is faster, more accurate, just a cleaner striker. There are going to be some serious like gulf in physicality moments in this fight that would make one look like an idiot for picking Neil Magny.
That a split decision?
Yeah, it was a super close fight.
Again, I'm misremembering the narrative of it, I think.
It was definitely all momentum headed in Neil Magny's direction after round 2, and yet it was a fucking dogfight. So yeah, probably an errant decision, but I'm gonna take Neil Magny, and whether he wins or not, I think we've definitely decided that there are some real areas where he can make Rakhmonov uncomfortable in ways that no previous opponent has really been able to.
Absolutely.
Let's take a break then. When we come back, a hopefully somewhat short discussion of a, well, frankly, very short fight. Tenshin versus Takeru after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's talk about kickboxing, Phil. How did this happen? This is the show where we just talk about every UFC card.
Because it was fantastic, and it's been the thing which all the kickboxing fans have been waiting for so long, and it ended up being like this. I mean, just like a very kickboxing kind of outcome.
Uh-huh.
It was everything that people kind of loved and hated about kind of not just kickboxing, but I guess like Japanese combat sports.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was it had a huge kind of sense of spectacle and scale to it. Had a super weird rule set. It had corruption and weird shit going on in the background, which adversely affected everyone's enjoyment of it. And then there wasn't enough, and you were just sort of left with a bitter taste in your mouth.
Yeah, I mean,
not necessarily bitter, but like bittersweet, and like, oh, it was fantastic, but it was over too soon.
As you sort of said before we started this episode, if you had been way more invested if you were a diehard kickboxing fan and you were just, the moment this was announced, I mean, it's an event called The Match. You know what I mean? It's that kind of big deal where it's like, oh, this is the fight that I want to see. Then I could understand being disappointed. If you are de facto more of a casual kickboxing fan, as you and I are, I think it's pretty easy to just have a blast watching this brief 9-minute spectacle of incredible technique and also like messy brawling and just straight up violence. You still left with a feeling where you're like, why couldn't these have been 5-minute rounds? Why couldn't there have been 5 of them?
Yeah, it would have been heartbreaking to watch it as someone who was super invested in this, as you know, many of our good friends are. Because
it's just a glimmer of something magical. I mean, it's awesome. It's 9 minutes that are really incredible to watch, but it's only 9 of them. So let's talk about it. Tenshin, apparently, I think you said retired after this. I mean,
I believe so. Yeah, he's going to boxing,
which is cool. A lot of great Japanese boxers. I'd love to see. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe Tenshin team up with Naoya Inoue. But there is a super strong and long tradition of great boxers out of Japan, and Tenshin, throughout so much of his kickboxing career, has kind of just been a flashy boxer. Like, it is often his boxing which really crushes other kickboxers. That is kind of his serious technical edge, which is, of course, helped by the fact that he is just lightning fast and has incredible reflexes and is super light on his feet and all these other physical things. But this is a great showcase of why he probably could make it as a boxer and has real potential, because he, this is an open stance fight against Takeru here. Tenshin southpaw, Takeru orthodox. And it's one of my favorite kinds of southpaw versus ortho fights, in that one fighter just dominates it with his jab. And that fighter is Tenshin.
Yeah, it is a tremendous open stance jabbing performance.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was just a great weekend for jabs.
Yeah.
What was it? I mean, it's rare you get a combination of the two. You get like just a fantastic weekend of violence, but also just like a great, where you can just be like, you know what? I wanted jabs and body shots, and I got them.
Mm-hmm.
It was really something for everything this weekend.
There was.
Yeah, so I mean, this was an interesting one, because as far as I could tell, a lot of sort of running into the fight was that Tenshin had been looking a little flat lately. The people, and Takeru is obviously just as you can tell watching the fight, just like bigger, more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
But that, Tenshin would have a significant edge, at least early, just due to like the speed. But I don't think anyone was quite ready for how much of an edge he was going to have early in this fight.
Speed and technique was a huge part of it.
Yeah, because I mean, Takeru is, we're not going to be nearly as experienced as other people who have watched these guys in their entirety, but really is is Brawler the right way to describe him?
Sure, yeah. He's got certainly a lot of elements of Brawler. It felt like, it's sort of like, again, it just makes you want to see it for longer, like a Margarito versus Kodo kind of fight. You have this just bigger, hyper-aggressive guy. He's tall and long, but he doesn't give a shit about what people think you're supposed to do with those things. He wants to get into the pocket and trade with you and grab you in the clinch and throw you around and a bully.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, and I think he has specifically had problems with southpaws before.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, what was the two? It was, I think it was, don't kill me, kickboxing fans. I think it was Yuta Murakoshi and Tiger, who were both like southpaws that he had major trouble with. Mm-hmm. I think this is at least partially, why he struggled quite so much in this fight. Because not only was he having his, not only was he fighting a southpaw that he struggled with, but like, just as you said, like a remarkable southpaw jabber. which is just not something you see even at like the decent levels, even at like the higher levels of combat sport.
Yeah.
And I think Jack Slack did an article kind of breaking down some of Takeru's game. A lot of it is that he is a lead foot kicker who tries to draw people into exchanges with that, kind of steps in, kicks, and exchanges. And that's just not really that available in a closed stance fight, and still less when you're getting jabbed up the middle every time you step in.
Yeah, and in fact, trying to initiate exchanges with kicks, like trying to like eat up space, cram the opponent into a corner, and then just fall in after the kick and trade with them. And there is one particular moment, that's one of the best moments of the fight. I think it was in round 3, where Tenshin is doing his thing. He's jabbing off the back foot. And we're going to talk more about that because it is the major element of this fight. And Takeru is like, oh, he's backing off. He's taken half a step back. I'm going to chase him away with a teep and then run after him. And Tenshin's like, I'm not backing off. That was just a half a step. And there you are standing on one leg and already moving even closer to me. And just nails him with like an invisible right hook. A right hook that is so thrown so tight and so close and so fast that you don't even realize what's happening until it's already landed, even as a viewer. It's just not a super viable way of fighting Tenshin, at least at his best. And I think, yeah, let's talk about southpaw jabs. How come nobody does it? It's just... People talk about jabbing in open stance fights as if it is impossible, when what they really mean is that it's different. It's difficult in ways that jabbing a fellow Orthodox or fellow southpaw isn't. But there's just different obstacles. There's more. The main thing is really that the other person's foot gets in the way. You are used to standing when you and your opponent are in the same stance. You're used to sort of both just being a direct step forward away from landing your jab, because their front foot isn't in the way of your front foot. And that also means that if you're stepping forward, you're putting your foot between their legs, basically. Your hand is unobstructed. The jab lines directly up with the center line. In those fights. And that just isn't how it works when a southpaw is jabbing an orthodox fighter or vice versa. Sometimes you want to step in a similar way past the lead foot, and you can jab directly up the middle. And this is when the jab is super useful because, 70%, even in striking sports, of people who don't fight a lot of southpaws are going to think, oh, I should step outside and throw my right hand. And that's, you're putting yourself in a position where you are giving away your center line. When you make that maneuver, you are presenting the southpaw with the same easy opening for the jab that orthodox fighters usually enjoy against each other. But the other one we saw a ton of in this fight is jabbing across by stepping out. The same kind of step you would if you were jabbing someone in the same stance, or the same kind of step if you were trying to throw your backhand. But using the weapon that's closest to the target, and thinking of the jab as something that needs a small angle in order to get around the lead hand. Because this is the other problem jabbing in open stance, is that there's hand traffic in the way of your jab. There's a lot of hand fighting that just happens as a matter of course, because your lead hands are essentially touching already when you're just standing at range in your stances. So your step needs to have a little angle to get around that hand from the other direction. And there's a ton of that in this fight. Just short little pivoting steps, moving away, the same thing you normally expect against an orthodox fighter from a southpaw, but jabbing instead of loading up and committing to a big left hand.
Mm-hmm. Or sometimes just right hooking.
That
again,
too.
Like if he didn't have enough of the angle to have the straight line, just hooking around the guard.
Hooking and the lead hand uppercut.
Yeah.
Another thing to mix off the top. And there's a beautiful sequence late in this fight where Tenshin steps in with a jab and backs Takeru off, and then feints and fires the right uppercut up the middle, and then Takeru is slightly staggered, and then he nails him with a right hook. 3 consecutive punches, all with a beat between each of them, all off the lead hand. Completely different trajectories for a guy who's already not, frankly, really defensively capable of stopping any of them on their own. So yeah, really incredible, fully educated lead hand performance from the Southpaw Tenshin here. It's just incredible to watch. And Takeru manages to make the fight like brutally messy.
Yeah, I mean his main thing is just like charging into exchanges.
Yeah, and really,
I mean it's a strange fight because again, probably one which benefits from just knowing the fighters better than we do, frankly. But because on the one hand, it's a fight where there's an obvious shift. The momentum is turning in one direction.
Yeah.
But it's one of these ones where I just don't know if the momentum was turning enough.
No.
Because Takeru was getting hit cleanly with big shots which were genuinely shaking him up.
Yeah.
All the way through the fight, including like right at the end. There's like a fight. There's like a 1-2 like 15, 17 seconds or whatever it is before the end of the fight. And Takeru's been kind of smiling through and like making his own exchanges, and it just stops him dead in his tracks.
Yeah, he's left thinking about that one for a few seconds after it lands. And it's not even a super hard, like, powerfully thrown shot. It's just clean, straight, right on the button.
But it is still, like, it's just a tremendous show of, like, guts. I mean, he is doing exactly what everyone asks for when that fighter is down.
Yeah. And it does really just make you want to see 2 more rounds or more.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you wonder if perhaps, you said this before, it'd be great to have like Luca Bordon on for something like this to tell us, like, what are the politics here? What was the contract signing process like? Was it a short fight in order to favor Tenshin?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can definitely see this one getting messier as the momentum, as you said, is shifting. On the other hand, despite the fact that Tenshin's only knockdown came in the first round, it also had the shape of a fight where, yes, it's getting messier, but you're not taking these shots as well by the end as you were midway through.
Yeah.
One caught you cold, and then you realized you could take it, and then you kept taking them, and they were shaking you up by the end of the fight. There is an attritive quality to the shots that Tenshin is landing, who also shows, by the way, like that 1-2 you talked about, comes immediately after he just sort of lets Takeru miss with like 8 consecutive punches. Which is another thing where it's like, well, so we had gone on, so maybe Tenshin would have had to what? He's won all 3 rounds, maybe he has to take a round off and spend a little time just defending and picking his shots more. He probably could have done that.
Yeah, I mean, I know he has had apparently problems with getting ragged late in fights.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Rodtang one was someone that people mentioned. But yeah, I mean, it was one, I think this was made, this fight was brokered between 2, as they often are, between 2 rival organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you find yourself thinking like, I mean, this is the rule set of, this is the Rise kickboxing rule set, which is, I think, 3 rounds and then another one for, if it's a draw. But yeah, you find yourself thinking like, did they do this because, because they wanted, because it was advantageous to Tenshin to have only 3 rounds?
Because Takeru's not going to have enough time for his pace alone to have a real effect. Yeah. Could be.
So I mean, I think he was the so Tenshin Nasukawa is the Rise champion, so they were fighting under essentially his rule set.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you said, a microcosm of Japanese martial arts entertainment, in so many ways, but it did have that special spectacle feeling, and it was a really entertaining fight, even being
mostly one-sided. Like all 3 rounds, easy for Tenshin. There's no question who won the fight, and yet there's so much pushback. Takeru just going for it from minute 1 and just getting more and more intense, and like clashes of heads and messy clinches and like grinding with like cross faces in the tie-ups. There's a really
punch to the back of the head, slams. There's
a really hard like tie dump by Takeru at one point where he just lands fully on top of Tenshin. It gets messy. It felt sort of like actually quite a bit like Willie Pep versus Sandy Sadler. Like you have this incredible little southpaw slickster and just a bully who will not let it be clean no matter what, and is doing everything he can to drag a fight out of this smoother opponent. Yeah, I would have loved to have seen more, but I am glad I got to see those 3 rounds. I was worried I wouldn't see them at all. So big thank you to Miguel Class, who you should definitely check out. A rising star.
Absolutely, yeah, he does actually do fantastic breakdowns on Twitter as well.
He does. Yeah, definitely worth reading and following on Twitter. And that'll do it for this week's Heavy Hands. Incredible weekend of fights. I mean, and more good stuff
sensational.
Around the corner. And what's our next pay-per-view after this? Adesanya, Kanan. Oh yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. It is Volkanovski Holloway 3 and also other stuff.
Jesus Christ. It's got Adesanya Cannonier, Volkanovski Holloway 3. We've also got Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. Cool. Pedro Munoz, Sean O'Malley. Brad Riddell, Jalen Turner.
Yep.
Good Lord.
Yep. The good times are continuing to
Bobby
roll.
Green, Jim Miller means nothing but sounds wonderful. This card looks phenomenal as well. So, yeah, a very good time to be a fight fan these few weeks here. And we're happy to have you here with us, enjoying, hopefully, our breakdowns. I don't know, usually it's a good sign when I have a really good time in an episode talking about the fights. Usually that means it's a good episode. So I would say this was a good one, Phil.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it was an inspirational weekend.
Yeah, very much so. Make sure you check out our Patreon. There's a couple more fights that we have yet to discuss, both from this... actually, maybe not for the upcoming card. I'm not sure yet, but we're definitely going to talk about some more of the Emmett Kattar undercard on our Patreon. It's $3 a month, and I uploaded a super long, like full episode length bonus episode last week, which was a combination of a couple different undercard chats. You can expect to find another one very soon, if it's not up already by the time you're hearing this. And make sure you check us out on Twitter as well, at Evil Greg Jackson. That's Phil. At Boxing Bush. That's me. And we will catch you next week for, just a continuing schedule of really, really enticing matchups. Until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, I think we can all agree you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands. It's so smarmy. I think, listen.
You guys.
I'm not talking out of turn when I say that you came to the right place. Talking like Dean Martin.